All right, welcome back to the Right Brain Podcast. I'm here with my guest, the wonderful, the super stupid, talented Faith Maddox. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you. Well, we're not welcome. Hi.
So you are a musician, a graphic designer. You work at SAPAC at the University of Kansas, and you're a giant voice on Twitter. I kind of want to start with the Twitter first. What, like, how did you? Well, has the pandemic made you like more courageous to like voice your opinions and say what's right?
I think in some ways, yes. But I've also kind of always been very like outspoken, maybe more so than I should be in some ways. Like I think a huge part of that has to do with my mom. Like I just don't really put up with shit from anyone. And if I have something to say, I'm going to say it. And so I think that, being in a very contained environment where like I'm not really leaving my apartment or doing anything like that, I think people will use social media, especially more so now, to convey things that they can't, verbally or to other people. And so, yes, maybe I'm like, I have more courage, or maybe I'm just more bored. But I think a huge part of it is I'm just like really fed up and exhausted and like existential all the time. So I'm like, haha, this would be very funny, or like
Yeah,
stuff like that. So
that's how it's been for me too. I've been, especially after seeing all of my friends advocate and speak their opinions and voice the voices that aren't so heard as much, words. um, I got the courage to actually go against what other people or people that I thought were my good friends, and just to say what I thought was right and to put out there what I thought was right. Um, so how's Alfie?
he's pretty good. A lot of people think that he's like the sweetest cat ever, which he is to a degree, but he's also kind of the worst. Like the first week that I got him, he broke this like standing mirror that I had, and so I had to like find a new mirror. There's like always something broken. The other day, he got into my partner's like box of charcoal, and this is like a white cat, and so for the past like 2 days he's just been like gray completely because I haven't had time to give him a bath like with finals. So tomorrow we're using Dawn and we're gonna give him a bath in the sink. But
Oh man,
he's
how do you think he'll respond to that?
I've given him a bath before, and it was a lot. It takes two people usually. It's
One
not
to
my
hold it
favorite.
down, one to scrub.
Pretty much, exactly. Yeah,
Well, hopefully it's not too much of a hassle.
we'll see.
Um, so we met in anthropology class. I think it was like Anth 150. Is that right?
Something
160?
like 160 maybe.
Yeah, one of the intro-ish ones. And out of everyone in that class, I thought you were probably the most tolerable besides the professor.
Yeah.
Not,
Oh,
not gonna
Josh.
be honest. Yeah, shout out Josh.
Yeah.
Um, and so in the anthropology class that we were in, um, you had hinted in some of your answers to questions and stuff, and like just me talking to you and getting to know you, that you had very cemented political views, and you were very passionate about, not cemented I should say because that's fluid, but you were very passionate about your political views and what you considered to be right. um, for for the audience, what are your political views?
Um, very complicated
And
question. That I never
open-ended, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just like never really have like a super specific answer because obviously I am passionate about politics, but it's less about like the core material of what politics is and like much more about like what it does to like people and what it does to society. So I'm less concerned with like defining it and like being within a rigid set of politics that I am, you know, self-regulating and making sure that I'm doing like what's right and taking action in the ways that I think are beneficial. But I guess, I've kind of talked to you about how I mostly prescribe, or like my set of beliefs would really fall under the umbrella of anarcho-communism. That's kind of not always what I like really identified with. For a long time, I actually did political action with like a group of Maoists, which like was really interesting. But like also, I'm super not timid, but like very, I don't know. I have a hard time doing certain actions. So I'm more of like the planner, thinker, you know, can't really get, I don't know, complicated. But how do I define my political beliefs? Sorry, this is such a drawn out answer.
No,
But
it's perfect.
yeah, I guess more than anything, like, I have specific things about how I think that a government should run and like what I think a government should do. If there should be a government at all, kind of, not really. But more than anything, I just like believe that all people should have access to things that we now deem as rights, but like are just basic necessities of life, like food and housing and like not money because we kind of created money, but like a way to participate in an economy that is like beneficial for all people.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of that. And for those who don't know, so you said that you subscribe more to anarcho-communism. For those who don't know, what is anarcho-communism like defined as, and what would be like the most ideal anarcho-communistic society in your eyes?
I probably will not have a great textbook definition of like what anarcho-communism is, but to me, like in communism, the end goal is to have like the means of production owned by the proletariat. And anarcho-communism has the same end goal more or less, but there are very different like specific elements of it. Like in anarcho-communism, the method to acquiring that is somewhat different. A lot of I mean, there's so many degrees of like what communist you are, like what kind of leftist you are, which causes so much internal bickering. But a lot of, generally speaking, communists believe that there's like a transitional state. Most democratic socialists really prescribe to this, and that transitional state is socialism. So you still have like a little bit of a mixed economy, and there's like more government regulation, whereas a lot of anarcho-communists believe in like outright revolution because you can't really reform the state that is currently in place. Like even just transitioning into something new, you're still using elements from the old state. And so it's more about like abolition in a lot of ways. um, and then another part of it too is that all people have not even like necessarily a fixed income, but like a fixed way of accessing resources, whereas in some visions of communism it's more about like you get them per how many hours that you labor, even though it would be more like equitable. It's much more about like everybody just has what they need. And that seems really idealistic and like unattainable to a lot of people, which my response is that everything is made up anyway. So I don't really care, and I will continue to think what I want to think and believe what I think is right. But another element of it that a lot of like what a government structure might look like, a lot of people talk about having like syndicates kind of, or community delegates that are elected and vote on issues like every day, as opposed to the participatory democracy that we have now, where it's like this huge popularity contest where one person wins and then they say that they're going to do all these things, and then they hold office for a set amount of time, and it's really difficult to remove them from those positions of power. More of like a syndicate style where it's like, yes, we elect people, but we have the right to take them out at any point if they're not doing what we want them to do. So it's similar but different and more accessible to all people.
I like that. It's like more of a, it's like the way society nowadays, or I guess forever, I don't know, describes democracy would be like more of like an indirect democracy. And what you're saying is more like a direct democracy with some terms and conditions that if the people in power don't do what they say they're going to do with that power, then different people go into power.
Exactly.
And you mentioned to me before when we were talking that you wanted to build like a commune. Um,
Yeah.
tell me more about that. What how do your views like fit into like action and brick and mortar?
I think that my initial desire to like start a commune just came from a sheer dissatisfaction of being within the society that we currently live in, and it's also just more of an existential thing, where I feel like proceeding. It was always a joke with some of my friends in early college and high school, like, oh, we're all going to start a little commune in the mountains and like remove ourselves and be hermits, which to me, like as an introvert and as an artist, I'm like, hell yeah, like I would do that any day of the week. But now that I've like gotten older and I've it's not that I haven't like been exposed to the world more, but in certain ways I have. I think more than anything, like being young and having like leftist political views, which how I even got into those is like a crazy, stupid, interesting story. I feel like I've just become really jaded in a lot of ways and like cynical. And so, to me, I'm like, I want to get like the people that I love and go somewhere and like live in a self-sustaining farm where we just take care of each other. And even like in therapy, I talked to my therapist about this a lot, and she was like, I mean, all that's doing is addressing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, that's totally reasonable and something you should pursue. So, like, if my therapist says I should do it, then I'm going to do it. Like,
I mean,
someday.
yeah, it is totally attainable. I mean, I don't I don't know about like the nitpicky issue, the details of it, but I know a cousin of mine who just kind of did what you're describing, and he just and he went off the grid, and he's in Montana,
Oh
and
wow.
he just has a cabin there or he has like maybe a couple cabins because he has a partner there, and then his daughter goes over there every once in a while,
Mhm.
um, and it's like the way he says it, it's like there's stoves and it's just run by trees, and it's super sustainable, and he just lives there and makes music. It's kind of sick.
I would.
But yeah, what you were saying about like like abolition and stuff, I think that that especially like the Democratic Party nowadays is just to get back to mainstream politics because that's all I know. Yeah, during this time in quarantine, I've been trying to inform myself more, especially with all these tragedies that have been gaining publicity and recognition throughout the country, and which is good. They should be, and all um, these injustices should be known and fixed. But I've been trying to inform myself the right way with more independent news sources and with things that don't push out like deep state theories and whatnot. I don't even know what all that's about. But so I've been noticing with these with my escapades of knowledge that um, that the Democratic Party, there's a noticeable rift is starting to form with what people call like the establishment, like your Joe Bidens, your I guess now Barack Obama's because he's not the new guy anymore, and like all the old heads who are part of the Democratic Party, and then with the people who lean more towards democratic socialism, like AOC and Bernie Sanders and somewhat Elizabeth Warren, like with things like that. So what would you think about that? And do you think that this rift is progress, or it's just unnecessary buzz that distracts us from a lot of people's main goal, which is similar to what you've been describing?
Let me start off by saying I do not consider myself a Democrat. I absolutely loathe the Democratic Party, like in every capacity. And
It's fair.
this entire election cycle, Joe Biden being elected was actually like, and this entire election was extremely triggering for me as a survivor. And yeah, huge part of the reason why I don't trust Democrats. I mean, like Democratic establishment, but even like close friends who are like avidly like strong liberal, blue, Democrat, like center, all that shit. Honestly, it just almost angers me more than Republicans because I expect stupidity. Maybe that's bad to say. I expect ignorance from Republicans. I don't want to see it in my moderate friends. But I think that like the rift is inevitable in a lot of ways. Like I think that that is just like a course of history that's occurred over and over and over again, and it will continue to do so until we don't live in the same rigid set of politics that we created however many hundreds of years ago. I mean, not hundreds of years ago. But I think that like it's good. Like I'm not. I like AOC. I'm fine with AOC. I'm fine with Bernie. Like they're definitely better than Biden. Give you that. I don't like Biden,
I'll agree.
but I do think that it's important for people to like recognize the rift and to understand why people are leaning more and more left. I think that like even considering it like, oh, people are going left is like kind of not a stupid idea. It's not about politics at the end of the day. Like it's not about like being left or being right. It's about people getting the things that they need. And so only classifying it as like a political movement, I think really detracts from the essence of what people are saying. And I think that like, I don't know, it's still not left enough for me if we're gonna talk politically, but like good. I'm glad that people are starting to recognize. I think that like AOC and Bernie are like gateway drugs to hopefully opening their eyes like a little bit more. But
I like that that metaphor that Bernie and AOC are gateway drugs to the to the nirvana that people are yearning for, that
I
people
will
need.
say, yeah, I will say that like I hope so, but at the same time, I think that Americans especially have a tendency to idolize politicians, and so my only warning with being like, oh, these people are good, like base level of where we should be, but like don't idolize them for doing the bare minimum because promoting self-care like on your Instagram live still isn't giving people healthcare. Like there's still a lot of other steps that need to be taken.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, and with all of this being said, I know that this podcast is focused around art and stuff. How do you take how you've well actually let me go back a little bit just for a little bit. You mentioned that it's a pretty wild story how you got into anarcho-communism in the first place. I kind of want to hear about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's actually because I'm a stubborn bitch that I became an anarcho-communist, which like makes sense. But when I think I was I was a junior in high school. As my second semester at AP US History, and I sat next to this guy, um, and he was very like adamantly like pro-life, like super conservative. Like I mean, I didn't grow up in Topeka. I moved there, and then I like went to high school there. It was very much like what you'd expect. But during like lessons and things like that, he would just constantly be like, "Ah, it's because of the communists," or like, "It's because of like black people," or "It's because of women," like blaming any world issue on anybody that wasn't like him or that he could easily like take advantage of. That shit pissed me off so much, and I was like, "Why am I just sitting here with my anger like this when I can't even like do anything to piss him off even more?" And so that was the semester that I read the Communist Manifesto for the first time because I wanted to like I don't it really just started out of spite. Like I wasn't taking it seriously. I put a communist sticker on my laptop. My friend brought his grandma's USSR flag and we like hung it up. And then at the thrift store, I still have it, like the Communist Party shirts, like communist leaders all like at a party and they're like drinking. And he walked in and sees all of this shit and loses his fucking mind. And it's just like, you're all a bunch of communist pigs. And I turn around and I'm like, I'd rather be a communist pig than a fucking racist. And that is how I became a communist because I was so mad at this man for talking and for being so ignorant that I was like, well, I'm going to learn and read. It got better after that. I actually started like reading and becoming more interested. I was like, oh, this is actually very accurate and like very good. But that is how I became a communist.
That's that's actually a great story and a great it's a lot of I think it's a good way I think it's a relatable way because especially like if you have like a mom or a dad that like doesn't let you get a tattoo or something. This is obviously not apples to apples, but um say they don't want to let you get a tattoo, then you just go and get the tattoo when you can, like, and you just get it like either something huge or something small, but pick the huge path, which, as you mentioned before, is what needs to happen if people need to get what they want, or can get what they want. They need to do as much as they can and as loud as they can. Um, but yeah, I think that's awesome. And does growing up and shaping you're shaping your views of the world, has that influenced your art in any way, would you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it consumes the kind of art, or it influences the kind of art that I consume uh, just as much. Like I still have guilty pleasures that are very much propaganda, like from the '50s. But like, oh, I love White Christmas. Like, I'm not going to deny that, even though it's like, But I think that as far as like creating art goes, beyond just what I consume, a lot of my earlier work when I first started doing art, not earlier, but like kind of like in the middle of when I really started taking art seriously, was more inspired by like things that I was reading that were, speculative fiction that had a lot to do with anarcho communism. Like, I don't really love this book as much now that I'm older, but Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed was like a huge part of like why I wanted to start writing again and like doing art, even though I don't write fiction anymore. Like I primarily just do nonfiction. And then my music is more like my art is still political, but in more of like a quiet, subtle way. I wish that it was louder. Like I'll never stop being loud vocally about the things that I believe, but art is also a form of reprieve for me. So like my music has a lot to do with what it means to be like more of like a woman and a survivor under capitalism and like what it means to be like a queer woman in like this world also at least a lot of like the newer stuff that I've been working on, maybe not as much things that I have released, but a huge part of the reason why I really got back into music was just because of like this situation that I had been in like an abusive relationship where like he used capitalism to gaslight me. He was just like, oh, this happened because I didn't learn sex ed under capitalism. So that is really what fueled me to start creating the art that I've created.
Wow. That's wow. And wow, that's wild. I mean, you got to find your sound somehow, I guess, and your style. But
Yeah.
so yeah, going back to your music, like what made you get into that in the first place? Like where did that all start?
I've been singing since I was 4. I started playing piano when I was 4 as well, and I played classically and then in jazz band for a little bit. I only played piano in jazz band because I wanted to sing. Like I hated piano by the time I turned like 13 and I've been forced to play it classically for so long. But I grew up singing gospel in like the Southern Baptist church because I primarily grew up in North Carolina. And I grew up around a lot of jazz, and my mom is also like a musician, and so is my dad. And then doing musical theater because I was super into theater for a long time, which is so funny to me now. But I really didn't start making my own music or even playing guitar until about, it's now been like 4 years. That's really when I first started kind of sitting down. I didn't actually create anything that was worth putting out or even sharing with people really until more recently. And even now, I'm still like, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, that's how I am with my my amateur attempts. I just wanted to put something out recently though, just to like make it more than just talk. Because
Right.
I kept telling people I was like, yeah, I'm learning how to produce. I'm like trying to get good and eventually maybe move on to other genres besides trap because I don't know, I felt like trap was the most accessible, at least to people now, and it was like what I was hearing most around me. Um, but yeah, um, what? So you started on piano, and then with jazz primarily, right? And with the jazz band, and then moved on to guitar.
Pretty much. I think did I start playing guitar before or after I joined jazz band? It was like the same year when I joined jazz band and started playing piano and singing for that in high school that I also bought my first guitar. So it was kind of like simultaneous.
What was your first guitar?
Oh, it was super cheap. I actually sold it in the spring because I really needed money. It was like a Squire, like knockoff Strat.
Oh,
But
that's lit. I
yeah, it
used
was
to have
fun.
a I used to have a Fender Squire Mini.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of what I started off at when I was really young. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I don't even remember honestly.
All right. Um, and so growing up with jazz, like who did you listen to? Like, what are some of your favorite like jazz artists that you grew up listening to,
That I grew up listening to
or even
primarily.
now too?
Oh, okay. Like, primarily what I listened to when I was younger was a lot of what my mom would play because she loves, Nina Simone and Ella Fitzgerald, and so I grew up listening to them a lot, which definitely, you know, is useful, and I still love them and listen to Ella, like, so much because in high school, I was just obsessed with her, and I would just, like, sing to it in the car, everywhere, all the time, but, as far as, like, more instrumental musicians go, I love Wes Montgomery, Joe Henderson's album, "Power to the People." I know that that's probably not the right name, but I've listened to Black Narcissus like probably more than any other song like in my entire life. And then Herbie Hancock, I also love a lot. I could talk about like jazz for a while. Also, Django Reinhardt is really sick. He was this dude who was like missing multiple fingers and like limbs, and he like played guitar like nobody's business, and it was
What?
really sick. Yeah.
That's wild. How do you? I don't even know how to begin to do that. You have to like
Yeah,
completely retrain yourself and just yeah, I feel like you'd be super isolated because everybody else is doing it one way. I
right.
mean, kind of like Jimi Hendrix in the way because he was left-handed.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, but growing up, my dad did play Ella Fitzgerald around me too. I was a big fan of that. She has a great voice.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to. It's like so soothing,
Yeah.
and her Christmas stuff is really nice too. That's what he played primarily.
Mm.
Um, but I really need to work on preparation better. Yikes.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, listening to all those artists and and just even in like the pop music space, is there anybody or like in general, is there anybody that like who do you look towards primarily for inspiration for when you're creating your own music nowadays?
A really wide variety of people, honestly. Although I will say for like the last 2 weeks, I feel like a lot of the music that I've been creating since I released my last EP is just different. Like when I first started playing, I was really, really into math rock in high school. And so a lot of what I played was extremely complicated. And I was like, I mean, not really extremely complicated because I was still a beginner, but it was very like a lot of different rhythms and so many like finger picking things and tapping and all this stuff. Whereas like now I'm at this point in my life where I'm like, I really enjoy people who can do the most with the like with the least. And so people, this album that I've been listening to literally every day for the last 2 weeks is Helena Dealin's "Someone New," but also her earlier EP "Drawing Room." I've just been like alternating between those, pretty much only listening to them between the last 2 days. Although I will say that I have this like weird secret love for Jack Harlow, so I'm very much excited for that album to come out tonight. So then that'll just be put within the other two somewhere. But yeah,
I like Jack Harlow as a person. I think like the two singles that he's put out, like "What's Poppin'" and like because that one blew up and it's pretty great and it's no I can see why it's people love it. But what was the other one that he put out after that? It was
I
Tyler
kind of
Hero, I believe.
I've listened to
Um,
a lot of his earlier albums, and so I honestly was really late to like the newer singles. Like I didn't even listen to like the newest single until last night, and I was like, oh, I wonder if the album's out. But
yeah, I don't know. Like based on the track list and the features, hopefully like his solo songs are good. But I don't know about these features. The Baby is fine, but the Chris Brown feature,
I'm
I don't
not
like.
like,
I don't like Chris Brown to begin with as a person. Let alone his music isn't even that great in my opinion.
yeah,
But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it's a bop.
we'll see. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, how many EPs? What does your discography look like now? Um, that you've
So I have the
released.
4 track EP that came out in the spring, which I recorded like in an actual studio and like did all that. And even though like I think the guy probably gave me a huge discount, it was still a lot for me to pay for by myself. So when I released my second one, which is more of like a single than an EP because it's really just like two like real songs and then a little interlude that's like dedicated to my partner. I think that like that I recorded that entirely myself and you can clearly tell that, which I'm fine with. Like I kind of like the whole like DIY sound where it's like you can tell that someone still put a lot of like care. It's very like intimate in a lot of ways. So I only have like 7 songs out right now. And I've been working on 3 new ones kind of in rotation for the last like couple weeks that I started over Thanksgiving break. And I'd really like to release a full length album maybe within the next like year. Since I'm graduating early and I'll have a semester where I'll just be working, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I'll use that to do stuff. But also with quarantine and being home all the time, my inclination to create art wavers a lot. I will say, like, there are times when I literally just have to lay in bed and do nothing, but other times I'm just like, all I want to do is play guitar for a couple hours. So we'll see when anything like really comes out again. I don't know. But
Yeah, I can I relate to that itch that you have because I well, sounds weird saying it out loud, but my instrument of like the instrument that I play most when I have free time is a ukulele because it's so small and anything sounds good on there. And I mainly just work on like chords and like how they sound together and like just progressions and things like that and just really basic stuff. But I don't have my ukulele here, and but there is a mandolin here. Kind of, it's a mandolin made out of a Brazilian instrument. I just tuned the strings to like a mandolin just because I didn't want to learn chord shapes with the other instrument. But So that's what I've been playing, and literally the other day I played until like my fingers hurt to like move, just because I hadn't played a stringed instrument in weeks, and I finally just got back into it, and it's been great. It feels great to scratch that itch, I'd say. Um, were you ever like afraid to put out your art at first, like to show people what you've been working on? Because I
Still
know
am.
that I figured that's how it is, because it's super intimate, honestly. Like it's vulnerable. It's like part of you, and you don't know if people are gonna like that part of you, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. It is. I don't know. I don't know. I've always been like very much an open book. Like people can more or less ask me anything and I'll answer it because I don't. There are a lot of reasons why I do that. One of them maybe just being because I'm not on meds anymore. So I'm just like, oh, I don't care. Like I'll say anything. But at the same time, I think a huge part of it too is that like I will just speak about anything because I feel like people shouldn't, with to an extent, shouldn't be ashamed of the things that they feel, especially in regards to their like mental health and emotions, which is probably why I'm really outspoken. But when it comes to music, it is more difficult in some ways to express those things than it is, you know, just talking like to people or like in writing even, because it's really like lonely. Like that sounds maybe, I don't know if that sounds right, but it's really lonely to create music sometimes because a lot of the times, like even now, I feel like I'm only really creating music for myself, which I am. Like I am creating music because I want to do it, but it is like really difficult to do that just generally, but like putting something out for other people to hear and then not really knowing how even people that are close to you feel about it is really isolating.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that. It's yeah, it's wild, but it's honestly satisfying to me, getting something that's in my head and then putting it out into like space, and having that um having that process, and just having that process finished, or at least to the extent that you were satisfied with. Because I mean, art, it can always be improved, but there's a point where you gotta stop, and otherwise it's gonna get worse if you try to, I guess, tweak it more. Do you think that applies to your music and to your paintings? Like, how do you know when to stop a painting or stop a song?
Um, I feel like when it comes to painting, I think it's easier because I'm a very like rigid, not rigid, but very structured person, or I require a lot of structure even within actually, not really within certain creative spaces, but when it comes to art, definitely. I think that because I started art at a time in my life when I was maybe like more so into structure. I don't really know if that makes sense. Whereas, like with writing, I can't plan anything out. Like when I'm writing, my partner is the exact opposite. He'll plan everything to a T, and I'm just like, no, I got to say what it like. I'm thinking as it comes to me, and I'll edit it later and like rearrange it. But I feel like I can't have like structured thinking, but when it comes to art, like I plan my paintings kind of. Like I mean, I haven't really done like a really significant painting until last night when I had to do one for a final. But with that, you know, I like planned it all out. Like I draw up my sketchbook, I do all these things, and then I think it's just finished when I get sick of it, or I'm just like, good enough, and then I just put the varnish on. Whereas like with music, I think that I never think that it's done. Like I never think that something is fully done ever. And part of that, you know, is because I don't really work with other musicians that much, which is kind of changing. Like over, you know, I have like a friend where I'll send like demos and like he'll now like like drum along to it and send me something back. So that's been like a recent development. But prior to that, I feel like I knew a song was done when I could like hear it in my head throughout the day. Like if I was at the grocery store and like I was like humming along to it, I was like, "What song is that?" I'm like, "Oh my god, that's my song," which sounds kind of stupid, but like it is like a really weird experience to have your own song stuck in your head. Or just when I get sick of it. Really, that's it. Like I'm such a perfectionist. My art is done when I like feel like I just can't look at it anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know where I heard this, but I heard an artist say that you should create music that you like, and if you don't like what you're making, then you're not making the right stuff, and you should keep practicing and keep molding your craft until you get to a point where you do like what you're making. And I think that um, I'm learning just now how to do that, just because I've only been working on music for like for to create my own stuff like for about a year now.
Mhm.
So I'm just now beginning, but I think in a lot of ways that you being, especially having put out as much as you have, just it may not seem like much to a lot of people, but to me that seems like a lot, and it's a very you're a very big inspiration of mine in in the space of creators and musicians, just because of what you have done and what you have put out and all the work that you have put into it, and like how you do speak about it, and um and just the way that you treat it. I think that there's a certain sanctity to creating music, and I think that you cherish that in a very good way.
Thank you.
Do you think your sound will ever change or evolve in the future, like drastically?
Drastically. I would actually really, really love to do R&B and jazz again. Like I feel like I was in this weird phase like my freshman year of college where I was going to audition for the jazz band at the school that I initially went to because I went to the University of Oregon before I came to KU, and then I just
Well,
didn't do it. And I would really, really love to do stuff with like beats and do R&B and jazz because that's like the stuff that I was raised on. But when it comes to, sitting down with my guitar and just playing my music, that's just like naturally not the sound I feel like that I create. Like maybe it's weird. I don't know if it's like weird to say this, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that I just create on my own is like it just has to have an essence of melancholy and existentialism that I feel like I can't naturally do with like writing R&B like on an instrument. Singing it totally different, but I don't. I would love to experiment with that, but even now, I feel like my sound is changing into more of like I'd love to create, or like the huge inspiration for what I'm doing right now is more of like a gothic sound because I'm super into horror and gothic art and like period pieces, and so I'd love to create something that feels really intimate and vulnerable and dark. But yeah.
wow, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would see myself doing trap and R&B ish type beats like that forever. Um, just because I think it's good to change and to experiment, especially with art. That being said, I did see your painting that you did for your final last night, and that is a wild painting. You said it was inspired by oh shoot, I'm gonna butcher this. It was inspired by a novel, I believe, and I don't remember the name or the author of the novel. Can you tell me more about that? Because that painting is wild
Thank
in the
you.
good way, in the best ways.
Yeah, so it's based on Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which I will pre preface everything that I say with that. If you compare today's society to The Handmaid's Tale, then you clearly haven't read Parable of the Sower. I think that Parable of the Sower is much more applicable and much more insightful about it. I love Margaret Atwood. Like, she's a great author, and I loved her a lot in high school. But anyway, so it's based around that. I had to do it. So my capstone was in African American speculative fiction. So we talked a lot about different like sci-fi, and that was like something I had read a really long time ago, or even like a year ago, probably. I have no sense of time, actually, like period.
None of
But
us do
then,
nowadays.
yeah, who does? Time is not real. I firmly stand by that. But it was something that we had to read again for class at the beginning of the semester, and so I chose to for my final project. We had to do if we did an artwork, we had to do a 4 to 5 page accompanying paper, like that was researched about whatever topic. I don't know. I basically did it about how speculative fiction can be used as a tool to portray trauma and critique um, systems and how they create trauma in a way that other genres really can't. And I used Parable of the Sower to talk about that a little bit more in depth. And so I chose to like certain symbols from the book with my own like added elements, like a conjuring circle and like the little ghost figures. But yeah,
That's dope. So with this painting, it's like a circle of candles, if I recall correctly, and then there's like some ghostly-ish figures surrounding what looks like a little village or like a church, like on fire. What is that in the middle?
Okay, so I'm so glad that you could tell what it was because as I'm sitting here, I mean, I have to like sit on the floor and paint in the dark because like I don't really have a great space to do it. Even now, like I don't have great lighting in my room. I'm using the freaking like energy happy light that my mom gave me that I took out of the box for the first time today because I was like, oh shit, this is actually useful. No offense, mom. Like I love everything you give me. But yeah, so basically the beginning of the novel starts out in this gated community because it's like it's a dystopia that's set in the 2020s. It is eerily applicable, eerily, and she wrote it in the 90s. Like it's not prophetic. Like you can see these trends emerging because of how systems operate. Like science fiction, like people. I don't know. That's a whole other topic. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, so there's a gated community that the main character lives in, and there's like a huge tree in the center, so that space that's like on fire, I wanted to be able to double as both like a fiery image and as a tree because it's shaped kind of like an ambivalent both, and also because I really messed up, so I was like, oh, we're just gonna like do this now. And then a huge part of it is like the church that her father runs out of their houses, and it's very like Edenic. And a clear parallel to the Garden of Eden. So that's part of why I did the circles as like almost like an enclosed space. And fire is a huge element in the novel and almost like just a symbol of chaos because the guiding theme is that the main character is creating her own religion. This book is super interesting. I need to read the rest of the series.
Sounds super interesting. A lot of my friends have like mentioned it and how passionate they are about it. I need to check it out, but I just suck at reading.
Oh, on it, I totally got, as an English major, I can't read anything for fun like anymore, but it is a great book and it's a really quick read. And I have a really hard time staying focused on books, but it was pretty easy for me, kind of. But yeah, basically it's just, enclosed by chaos. The guiding metaphor is that God is change. As she's creating her religion, like there's no real God except for the concept of change. So I kind of saw chaos embodied in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting how, I mean, in nature and in science, I've heard mentioned that um, there is like natural chaos and how that like creates, I mean, that's how the universe was kind of made, right? It was just like a lot of things compacted and then quickly expanded, so they say.
So they say.
And then through that collision and chaos created planets and everything else and stars and whatnot. Um, and I think that reflects from that bigger scale to down to, I think it trickles down to the planets and the moons and whatnot that were made, and even further down to things on those planets and whatnot. That was a bit out there, but that's kind of what I got from that. Um, but yeah, so inside the circle, to me, I immediately thought it was like a church or like a town hall type of building, like a figurehead that kind of like an authority kind of center. But that's probably wrong and all that.
I mean, it is right in its own way. Like, I like that interpretation. I always think it's really interesting, like, to see what people glean from anything that I make, like, whether that's music or art or writing, because it's usually, I mean, that's like such a common thing to say, but it is usually totally different from like how I perceive it, which I think is like super beautiful and weird, and also why I think that art shouldn't necessarily have a ton of meaning and why I love really chaotic movies that like you can't make heads or tails of because then you get to see all of like how people project their own experiences onto it and like their own perceptions. But no, it is in a way like a critique of authority, obviously. Like, I mean, that's pretty evident in the book and how she talks about how her dad like runs their community and the different structures there and like the things that they allow and don't allow. So yes and no. I think yes, but
Yeah. So you mentioned like chaotic movies, um, that that's like what you like to watch and stuff. What is an example of like, or what are a few movies that you would consider to be chaotic that you enjoy, that you would also recommend to other people?
I love Suspiria. I've seen that a few times. It's also really interesting. If you watch that movie, I would highly recommend reading The Red Army Factions. Is it like the guide to the urban guerrilla concepts written by the Red Army faction? Because when I first watched the movie, I hadn't read the pamphlet, and someone had given it to me as a gift like last winter. And it's basically about like a communist faction, like within Germany. And a huge element of the movie is you see, like, they talk about the RAF constantly, and like the Berlin Wall, like the dance academy that is focused, is directly across from the Berlin Wall. And so, having read the pamphlet, it gave me so much more insight the second time that I watched it. So, I would highly recommend. I also really liked, I'm thinking of ending things. The ending was like really a lot for me to process because of my own like trauma, but I still really liked the movie. I'm trying to think of other things that I've watched recently. I really love like gothic, like horror. Horror is probably my favorite genre of movie. Even though, like, honestly, if it's really gory or like there's a jump scare, I like watch through my hands. Even though I love these movies. What is it called? It's Guillermo del Toro. Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak, great movie. So anything in like those veins of movies.
Do you like The Shining?
I love The Shining. Great movie.
Okay, because that to me sounds like what you're describing. It's just super chaotic and I mean, I'm not too big on. I don't know much about film and how that's and how that medium is made from thoughts and feelings and things like that and ideas and concepts. But to me, The Shining just seems like a bunch of chaos, and but it all follows together, and all work no play makes Johnny a very dull boy. Is that right in the quote? I don't know. Um,
Yeah, kind of.
anyway, um, so with your experience in visual art, I saw that recently. It was earlier this year, if I'm right, that you created a store or kind of a boutique, or not a boutique. That's terrible. Um, like a store that you showcase products that you paint with and design in your own way and put your own touch on with your friend.
Hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So our like store, I don't even know, like our shop, our Instagram page. I don't. Yeah, there's not really like a right word, um, but it's called Peach and Bong, and I run it with my roommate Ren. And basically, we just create different smoking accessories, like weed accessories or whatever else you might want to use it for. So we've done like handmade ashtrays. Like we use a lot of clay. I've painted like a couple rolling trays. I painted a bong recently, which I cannot do again for a while because it took me so long, and painting on glass is really hard. And
I
yeah,
bet.
but it's been fun. It's been difficult along like the backdrop of other responsibilities, but it is fun. I just have to remind myself whenever I do anything like this that I'm not creating art. Like I don't have to create art to sell it every time, which is definitely an instinctual thing that I think most people feel nowadays. But I have to like remind myself to keep things separate.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point because at least for me growing up, I always saw the narrative of the starving artist and that they're just making to make ends meet.
Right.
And and I like that the like the nature of Peach and Bong, where it's just like it's cute, quaint things, but it's also they serve purposes and they look nice, you know. And so it's not like just like you're buying art, which there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, people love art and people buy art all the time, and different things can be considered art to different people. But what I like about it is that there's form and there's functionality, and um, I think that it gives a new like type of appreciation for it, where it's like, yeah, it's a tool, but or sometimes it's a tool, or sometimes it's a decorative piece, but it's also can just be admired when you're not using that or not, um, yeah, not using that.
Right.
Um, so where did the name Peach and Bong come from? Is it anything on like Cheech and Chong? Because that's immediately what I thought when I saw it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that that is what you thought because it is based on that kind of like. I think we were just brainstorming names the first time that we were creating stuff. We were just sitting on the floor in the living room, like painting ashtrays, trying to come up with like different names. And I was like thinking, like, oh, what rhymes with Cheech and Chong? Like, and just coming up with different things. I was like, Peach and Bong. And it was like totally random. Like, it wasn't, really planned out or formulated. I was just kind of like, oh, this would be easy. Like it's kind of cute. Like it's got a ring to it. So yeah.
And knowing that, is there like a character like duality with that? Like, is one person is are you Peach, for example, and Ren is Bong, or is there anything like that going on?
I mean, not really. Like, I could definitely see how I would be Peach and she would be Bong, or vice versa. Like, I feel like I'm more, I don't know how to describe it, like cottagecore, bubbly, whatever. So maybe I'm Peach. I don't know. I don't like to self crit like that because I don't like. I don't know, but yeah, it's very possible like that. Subconsciously, we fit ourselves into these like roles, but
It's hype. And what is the piece that you guys have up there that you're most proud of? You'd say.
the piece that I created that I'm most proud of, I honestly don't. I really liked the rolling tray set that I did recently, like with the clouds and stuff like that. I actually got a commission. The commission that I'm about to go work on later tonight is like to more or less recreate that, not exactly, but like different elements and a different color palette. So I really liked that. That was also like the first big thing that I'd painted in acrylic prior to like this painting. In like I don't even know how long because all I really do for art now is the stuff that I do for work, and so I don't really get a chance to paint very often outside of doing my second job or my other job of tattooing. So it's like I'm always doing some kind of art. Like it's just complicated. Like
I didn't know you tattooed. That's awesome.
yeah, I do. People are always like, it's such a personal opinion, but I do hand poke tattoos. So
Oh
yeah.
wow. Well, don't be surprised if I hit you up in the future. But yeah, so you can find Peach and Bong on Instagram, right? On that's Peach and Bong all together, like the letter
It's just
N.
peach and
Right.
yep and bong. Yep.
Okay, cool. And then, all right, yeah. So earlier we mentioned the fear that most artists have of showing their work and stuff. Is there anything that you would like to say for those people who have those anxieties and those barriers, I guess, in their minds to put out are what they are proud of and what they've made?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I feel like I'm not super. I mean, I'm good with like psychological advice, but when it comes to like inspirational messages, I'm maybe like not the best. But I think that like at the end of the day, part of being an artist is not necessarily hating the things that you make, but still being scared to share them because, like you said, like it's an extremely vulnerable and intimate thing. And I think that like the way that I always see it is that life is so short. Like, and the things that you worry about are things that people do not notice. Like, there are certain elements of things that I painted or created that people are like, I love this, or like, I didn't even notice this. And I'm just like, oh, so I worried about this for 3 hours for like, why? Like, So I think that at the end of the day, like, you have to accept that nothing that you make will ever be completely perfect, but it'll be perfect in its imperfection and the way that, like, you've put time into it. Like, ultimately, the passion and like the drive that goes into something is more valuable than how other people see it or like how it's able to make a profit or how it's able to get you fame or anything like that, because there's a reason that not a lot of people do or continue to do it after a long period of time. Like, it's about what you put into it and how you get like that back out of it, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. It's like the I'm gonna think of a corporate motto now. What's that? There's a gum company that's like get good in, get good out, or put good in, get good out, or something like that. But it's kind of like that, I guess, huh?
Pretty much, I guess, kind of. Except good is subjective, so
Yeah,
never
yeah,
worry about, being good is another part of it because nobody's really good
yeah.
ever.
That's true. It's just lines that we form um into pictures, I
Mhm.
guess. But yeah. So Peach and Bong on Instagram and Faith. What is your Instagram? Your personal Instagram?
Oh, my personal Instagram is just Faithica, and it's F with two A's, ITHICA. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So her Instagram and Peach and Bong, and then her EP. So your EPs, where are they up on? Where can people find them?
You can find all of my music on pretty much any streaming platform. So Spotify, Apple Music. My first EP, Year Without a Summer, is on Bandcamp, and I still need to upload the second one. Six
Shout out,
Foot Shadow. It's
shout
called
out
Six Foot
Bandcamp.
Shadow.
Oh,
Yeah.
6 foot shadow is the most recent one.
Yes.
All
I
right,
just
sweet.
posted it. So yeah, you can find it on Bandcamp, or any streaming service, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever you'd like. I think it's on like some really weird ones too that I like will get notifications like, "Oh, your album's been uploaded to like Deezer." I'm like, "What the fuck is that?" Never heard of that, but
Yeah, me neither.
people on Deezer can listen to my music. So
I mean, I always think more companies is better, or at least more competition, just to not have all the wealth in two or three companies. But yeah, so her EPs are out on every single streaming service. And Faith, thank you so much for being on here. I really loved talking with you and learning from you. And I hope you have a good day.
awesome. Thank you so much.